Here we go. Awesome, awesome. Thank you very much for joining the International Euphonium Summit 2023. This is our guest, Michael Goodman, amazing composer, artist, grant writer, and so much more. Can't wait for y'all to dive into this interview. I'm your host, Nicholas Haffter von Heide with Farm for Dreams. Now let's get to this. Thank you so much. Michael Goodman's composition has been described as dramatic, humorous, and energetic. He views composition as a communicative tool that enhances his musical and philosophical ideals. Michael's music stems from personal neurospicy experiences of his own and close friends. He creates music that is organic by including acting, speech, humor, and drama. Inspired by combining various genres such as rock, jazz, and classical music, he creates unique musical experiences exquisitely expressive and authentic. His compositions have been performed throughout the United States, North America, United Kingdom, Portugal, Hong Kong, and Croatia, and musicians and ensembles and festivals. Welcome, Michael Goodman, to the International Euphonium Summit.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for making this time to join us. And wow, you're one of the first euphonium players / composers that I've actually had the privilege and honor to serve and interview. And so combining a question series to reflect both aspects and keep it within a certain respectable amount of time is a bit challenging. So why don't you take us through when you started Euphonium and when did composing all come to light for you?
Okay, well, that's a lot to unpack. So yeah. So starting off with Euphonium, I actually started off taking piano lessons for a brief amount of time in 5th grade. And that only shortly lasted because one day I heard someone else play better than me. And I was like, I'm done playing piano. Don't want to deal with it. We kind of regret that decision, but that's up to deciding. It wasn't until 6th grade I started playing euphonium. I originally wanted to play saxophone, but my brother, who's also a saxophonist, was like, I don't want to have competition between the two of us. So then I was like, okay, there's trumpet, trombone. And my dad was like, my dad's a tuba player. And he was like, oh, why not euphonium? I'm like, what's that? And he said, it's essentially like a trombone. It plays similar music, but it has valves like a trumpet. So I was like, what the heck? Sure, let's play it. And I've been hooked. Composition did not happen. It's kind of hard where I started because I've messed around with recording stuff when I was a lot younger. So I don't think that would be composition, but some could say. I had a copy of Finale in 2005 and I just messed around with it, see like what was possible, what was impossible, just messed around. But it wasn't until 2006 when at the time I was taking lessons from Phil Cinder at Michigan State and at high school. And my dad and him met once and they were trying to talk, okay, what should Michael go into for college? And originally it was, I thought about music performance, but Phil was saying to my dad that that's great, but the competition for getting jobs in performance is very difficult unless, you go to a specific school and all this stuff. Music education was an option, but I didn't have experience or an interest. So then composition was the other option. And then that's not only when I started seriously composing, but I started taking lessons also in 2006 as well.
That's awesome. So when did you first involve and consider involving euphonium into your compositions?
It's interesting because it was also that same time I took a lesson from I'm not sure if I could use names or not in this interview, but there's a composer by the name of Matthew Shaendorf, who I believe is in Wayne State University. He was also coincidentally a euphonium player. And I wrote a duet for 2 low brass players. So you could say that was the first time I wrote for euphoniums, but it was more like general low brass. But 2009 was the year when I wrote a euphonium solo with piano titled Fantonium. I wrote it for myself. And at that moment, I just thought, wow, I actually have the ability to write something that not only is for my instrument, but suits my own personal strengths and weaknesses, or opportunities rather. So it's 2009 was the official year, but you could go back as 2006.
Wow, that's really incredible. When did you first realize that you wanted to pursue um, either composition and or euphonium as a dream career?
That's, that one I had to think about that one for a minute, because you would think that when you go to college, that was the time you started. But for me, when I started going to Michigan State, I was a composition major, but I wanted to be more performance emphasis. So composition was more like a cover for what I really wanted to do. But when I switched teachers and I got a different perspective on, as far as composition, how things were to work or how it functioned, I started to get addicted to the idea of writing. And I thought, wait a second, this is something I just love doing. And I just wanted to keep going. And that was also in 2009.
That's really cool. When did you first tell your family that you're going to pursue and go to college for music?
Oh man. That was pretty early on. It was kind of obvious because my brother went to college, 2005. Well, so around the same time my brother was interested in music, I was interested in music too. It was pretty early on, probably my high school years.
Well, that's cool.
So
You
yeah.
said your brother played sax. Is he a year older than you, or
Say, let's see. I'd say a year and a half, almost 2 years older.
so he was 2 grades above, or just a
Yeah,
grade?
two
Two
grades
grades.
above.
That's cool. So that's cool. And I'm assuming you played baritone and euphonium in high school, in especially marching band and stuff.
Yeah, so euphonium was the main instrument I had, but in marching band, I started off on trombone for 2 years because there was no euphonium player. And I mean, there was one, but my teacher suggested me playing a different instrument to fit in with a larger section. But then my junior, senior year, I played euphonium in marching band. But I've played other instruments too, like bass guitar for jazz band. I've played I did play tuba, sousaphone once for pep band for 1 year, and I've messed around in tuba here and there. But yeah, so mostly euphonium during my high school career.
Well, that's cool. Um, hmm. This is a really intriguing interview. Uh, I'm going over questionnaires, and uh, the the difference in the composer aspect and the euphonium aspect has me a little bit pulled one way or the other, and I would love to be able to cover all aspects and facets because there are some really gifted euphonium players, who artists who are uh, composers or looking at writing composition of some sorts. And I know before our conversation, we had a really good discussion on kind of your personal journey in writing a special solo.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really cool. I hope people will enjoy what's coming up here. When did you first start your brass band experience? You mentioned brass band in the pre-recorded live here.
Yeah. So you're asking when I started or when
Mhm.
did I?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I've been involved with the brass band called Capital City Brass Band. They're based in the mid Michigan area, specifically Lansing, Mason, maybe Jackson area, because a lot of our concerts are there. I started off originally as a substitute player in, I want to say 2008 or '09. But and I played mostly euphonium, maybe baritone horn parts, even though I didn't have a baritone horn. It wasn't until I believe 2010 when I became a member and I played baritone horn. And for those who are not familiar with playing baritone horn, it's very similar, but in my opinion, baritone horn feels like you're playing through a pea shooter. It's like very narrow, more cylindrical. It it's not, for me, it's not the best experience but the parts, especially first baritone horn parts, they're definitely worthwhile playing compared to second baritone horn. No offense to those who play a second baritone part, but but I've played in the brass band from 2010 to 2015, because I had to move to Florida State, Tallahassee for Florida State University, and then fast forward to 2022, I get an email from the personnel manager saying, "Hey, we need, are you interested in subbing on baritone horn again?" And I said, "Sure." Couple rehearsals pass after I play baritone horn, and then the personnel manager comes back and says, "This is kind of a shot in the dark, but do you play E flat tuba?" And I said, "I've played tuba before, but I'd be interested to try." So I didn't have an E flat tuba, but I borrowed another player's horn. He has two horns of two E flat tubas, so it was no
Oh,
problem.
wow.
And it was he gave me a big Besson, like for those who know the number of models, it's a 981, so it's like a 3 on top, 1 on the side, an 8 from the 80s. And so it was like, oh wow, it's just like playing my euphonium but much bigger. And I've been hooked, and I became a member again. So 2010 to 2015 I was a member, then I re-entered as a member in 22, but on E flat tuba. The only problem is, and I'm sure you've seen this before, I've mentioned this before, I don't own one, and I've had that tuba for over a year, and I'm like, at some point I gotta find my own instrument. How do we get this to work? But
so if any of our audience members happen to have an extra E flat tuba, let Mike Goodman know in the comments below, or send him a private message or whatever, or actually go to his website that will be linked below, and let him know if he's still looking for one at the release of this or not. We'll
see.
Yeah, we'll see.
I didn't mean to turn this into like a promo for me to get a horn, but
no. Hey, I'm here to serve you and our community, and
right.
if this means it can mean a variety of things. For me, it's helping and serving you and our community. And if someone happens to have what you need or what they need that you have, everybody wins. And so that's really the mindset, is equipping current and future euphonium artists, which you happen to need a E flat tuba, which is fine, because I currently have I want to say an early 1900 E flat alto horn.
Oh wow.
And so it's a lot different than an E flat tuba, or I'd have offered my horn, but it is different quite a bit. And so if anybody has one, where to find him, by the link below. And so as far as composition goes, where do you go mentally to prepare your mindset for composing your works when you first started as opposed to now?
Oh wow. It's very interesting, because for me it's always different every time. And if we're talking about starting a piece or just getting into the zone, for me I need to have my own space. My wife totally understands that I need the time, need the space, all that stuff. I'm sorry, you asked about like as in when I started and then now, or did you say in general?
In general, yeah.
Okay, sure. So in general, when I get into the zone, I try to, depending on the circumstance, if I'm just writing for the sake of writing, I usually will think to myself, okay, what am I interested in writing? And one of two things will occur. Either I'll already have a motive in my mind, and then I just try to jot down the notes and then try to think of ways to experiment with them, whether it is playing on my horn or probably trying to draw a certain like contour or a certain sound I want. Or in many cases, and I've told a couple people in the past about this when they try to write music for the first time, I usually will gravitate to like creating an outlines, and it's kind of like writing an essay. So when you write a paper, what you're usually taught is you write an outline that says the intro paragraph, the body paragraph, and the conclusion paragraph. Same with music. Sometimes I'll have an idea. I was like, okay, I got an idea to write about, let's see, I'm trying to think of an example. Let's say you're writing a piece about your sibling, whatever relationship you have with your sibling. You basically will write, like, just write in the paper to write about sibling, and then you try to come up with ways on how you want to start it. Then you try to make a separate description on body, and then the description on conclusion. You might not have the entire piece done, but at least you have an outline or a frame on how that works. And I usually do that whether on manuscript paper, or I recently have converted to using my iPad, where I have this app called Good Notes, where I can actually import templates of manuscript paper into Good Notes and just write on there, which, if you're cautious about wasting paper, that is one way to prevent that. But it's also great to save your notes as well, rather than losing it in big piles of paper and then you just lose it for however long it takes.
Right. So you're mentioning your space when it comes to your wife allowing that creativity
Mhm.
to kind of manifest. Are you more of an indoors or outdoors, or wherever you feel inspired?
It's anywhere really. There'll be times where I might go for a walk and that'll get inspiration for me. Other times I'll just be in a specific mindset, not sure what type of mindset, but it just pops spontaneously indoors, and it goes like that too.
That's cool. Have you ever been at hearing about your genres in your bio is, have you ever been to like a Dave Matthews Band concert, or any group or jazz concert that you were inspired by, and you started writing down that framework?
Oh wow. That's a really good question, because I haven't been to many jazz concerts lately. Um, man, I don't think I've had a concert where I've been inspired like that as far as jazz, but I would say the one concert that really got me, it's not a jazz concert, but it did involve Wynton Marsalis.
Oh
There
wow.
was when I was interning in Chicago, Illinois, I was able to go to a concert at the Ravinia Festival, and the Chicago Symphony Orchestra had their pops concert there, and they were actually, it just so happened they were premiering Wynton Marsalis's violin concerto, and I thought, oh, I knew he wrote classical pieces here and there, but I was not aware he not only was premiering a piece, he was there, and I was like, oh wow, I've seen him before at Michigan State, but so I'm aware of him. But I heard his violin concerto, and it obviously had the roots of jazz, because that's what his main background is in. And obviously, I mean, it wasn't able to write out of it, but it made me open up my mind and say, wow, I could easily, I mean, for me, generally, I was thinking, wow, this is actually a really nice blend of using jazz and classical music. In my opinion, probably much better than maybe Gershwin. And I know Gershwin did his thing, but Wynton Marsalis is current, and it just makes it sound really cool that he could still do that and everyone else could still do that. But to me, I thought, okay, well, I could easily blend more genres. I could definitely get away with using jazz in other settings, and it was just very fascinating to see that.
That's cool. You mentioned in before our live recording here on video that your father plays tuba. Does he still
Yes.
play tuba, or?
Not as much, because he's been more busy with bass guitar. He's actually he used to play in the brass band I was in, but basically he was able to get back into playing bass, and it's one of those things where he's just enjoys playing bass guitar more often. But he still has his B flat tuba. So if for some reason I'm like, hey, I need to play B flat tuba, he probably would let me try it out or play it. So
That's
I
cool.
mean, we live nearby, so that's not going to be an issue.
That's cool. Where are there any other family, like extended family members, do you know of that played instruments possible, in the brass family besides your dad?
I'm thinking, excuse me. I know I had a cousin who played trumpet briefly. I don't think she really played that long. As far as I mean, we had a saxophonist. That's my brother. My wife used to play clarinet, but as far as brass, I think it's just my dad and I
That's
currently.
cool. That's cool. Um, what who would you say inspired you the most as a euphonium player and additionally as a composer?
Hmm. That is very that's a great question because there's a lot of euphonium players to pick from. As far actually I have two different people for this because it's kind of hard for me to merge one together.
Sure.
As far as euphonium players, ooh, wow. It's hard to say because I use like as far as performance wise, Stephen Mead used to be, it was like the epitome of like how to play well and be really good at like, the techniques and everything. But I would argue lately I've been influenced by Gail Robertson because it's a funny story. I actually met Gail at Michigan State when she was a doctoral student and I was a master's student.
Oh,
And
wow.
yeah, mind you, there was a break between her master's at Indiana
Uh-huh.
and then Michigan State. So quite a number of years. And
Troubadour.
I think, yeah. But what was so fascinating was that the reason why I put Gail on that name is because not only she's really good, she was personable. And I've met euphonium players in the past who were outstanding musicians, but it was always hard for me to connect with them because they either they're from a different country and they had different ways of understanding how we are, or maybe they just didn't really have any interest messing with people. You know what I mean? Like there's like
Right.
that starstruck and you're like, don't know what to say. And they're just like, what are you doing? But Gail was like, she was very low key and she was like, oh yeah, no, let's talk it over. Let's chat sometime and just see what you got going on. And not only that, but she also was a composer too. And so
Uh-huh.
we both had a lot in common in that regard. And so, you know, oh man, I mean, there's a number of things I could talk about Gail, but I mean, I look at her and she's definitely an influence euphonium wise. Compositionally, I would say my teacher, Dr. Ricardo Lorenz, he still teaches at Michigan State to this day, and he to me was the one teacher that taught me how to understand the philosophy of how to live as a composer. Because composition, for those who are interested in going to composition, it's not necessarily a skill set. For many, it's mainly a way of a lifestyle. So if you are a composer, you have to understand what that means in your livelihood, because you could definitely gravitate to many things in that field and all of that. And I mean, we still catch up to this day, and it's definitely one of those things that I take for granted.
So you're mentioning composition as a lifestyle, and does that include what he teaches and kind of his doctrine of how he conducts himself? Is it more of the marketing industry type composition, like how to market yourself and to acquire potential commissions, or how does that work?
So with composition, like when I say like the philosophy of lifestyle, it's basically the idea of you, regardless of what you do for a living, whether it's a freelance composer or if you're working in a corporate 9 to 5 job, but you have the time to write. I think that's more of the direction he was going for, is that you basically acknowledge you just have the ability to write. And marketing is also a part of it, but it's not emphasized as much because that's more of a music business perspective of, music as a whole. But
That's
yeah,
really
so
cool.
yeah.
When did you start submitting your pieces to publishers?
Um, let's see. I started submitting them in, I'm trying to think. I I'm looking over my notes here. I know I didn't really. I've always submitted it one time in 2019, because, well, okay, in 2019 I submitted it to a publishing company for a band piece, which that was actually my first band piece I ever wrote. And luckily for me, I was actually selected to be a part of their publishing company for one of my pieces.
Well, that's awesome.
Which they're called Tux People's Music. They're based in North Texas, like what is it, Denton, Dallas area. So that's where they're based.
Area.
Yeah, around there. But I don't. I barely submit for publishers because I like to be a self-published composer, which I understand that is a very difficult decision because yes, you make more money off the royalties, but you run into the risk of having to do all the work. You have to be the one that has to market your own music. You have to go to the music stores. You have to go find a way to promote yourself because if you don't do it, no one's going to buy your music. So
right.
there's
and this is a perfect platform for Michael Goodman, composer, euphonium artist, and extraordinaire. This is a great platform. I'm thankful that you took me up on being interviewed for this because the self publisher is someone who, in speaking with a few composers already, already have that self-publishing entity to themselves, and you can find all of his works, which is not just 2019 current. It's all the way back to, I think I saw quite a few from 2008, if I'm not mistaken.
I have some on there from 2008. Sorry to interrupt. It's 2008, but those are like pieces I've listed, but they're not available. I'd say the one that's the oldest one that's available is 2011.
Okay, well, still, that's over a decade, and you can go back and if you find one that you like, and it's not necessarily your instrument, reach out to him and work out a way that you can get it transcribed. I don't know how that process works for you.
No, that actually you nailed it right in the head. If you for some reason are a euphonium player and you want to play a piece that I have, but it's not for your instrument, just reach out to me, whether it's through my webpage or just whatever way to communicate with me. We could definitely work a deal where I could help transcribe or arrange that for you.
That's really cool. So I want to dive into something that just popped into my mind.
Sure.
And this is kind of on the fly, is if a euphonium player or any musician has a particular piece, and we were talking about this kind of beforehand with Finding Forrester in the transcriptions,
Okay.
is if a euphonium player specifically, just a framework, has a orchestral suite or whatever piece of music that they really, really enjoy, and it hasn't been arranged or transcribed for euphonium or put into a format that is maybe euphonium quartet or whatever it may be, could they message you to see if you'd be willing to take that on?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always open to that. Of course, when it comes to reaching out and trying to request a transcription job, it involves a lot of parameters in terms of how many instruments do you need, how long is the piece, and what's the rate. Because, excuse me, when it comes to that type of job, I do have, and I will say with any job, whether it's commissions or if it's transcriptions, I'm very transparent in terms of what I charge, because I know a lot of composers, they say they do, but they don't really say upfront what they charge.
Right.
So I do that to be very accessible. And so
I was noticing on your website, and I understand where you're going with this, and maybe give you a parameter for our parents and or the student artists, right? If they were to take that piece, and let's say it's the framework is overall it's like a 6-minute piece in a performance venue, like off of a CD or whatever, and you would like it a 6-minute, you can go to that table that Michael has on his website that's linked below, and see how much it would cost or thereabouts for that framework, plus
Right.
all the other parameters, if it's a ensemble piece or what specific dynamics. That's the best way to kind of gauge on how much you're going to be needing to fundraise or provide or have a community sponsored event to fund your specific project through Michael. Am I correct, or am I?
I'm trying. Can you clarify that for me, please?
Yeah,
I'm
sure,
sorry.
sure. So being a grant writer, could they take that project that requests to, in a way, transcribe or commission this arrangement? Would they be able to take that framework of price that you have on your website and build out a fundraiser to get the community involved, or their little circle,
Mhm.
to fund that project?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, when I have that table up, I actually encourage people to do what I like to call a consortium, where
Consortium.
um yeah, so consortium, which for those who aren't aware, it's basically where you have one person reaching to, let's say a performer wants to, okay, well, let's put it in a more broad perspective. Whether the commissioner reaches out to a composer and says, "Hey, I want to do this." Let's say a duet for 5-6 minutes. Let's just say 6 to be concrete. And the problem is that they can't afford it. And what I would suggest is, well, let's see, how many people would you want? Or actually, first I would say, what can you afford, or what makes it more marketable for you? And then basically, if they give you the number, and then what we would do is we would try to recruit X number of performers who would also want to be involved in the collaboration. And what that does is it basically will split the cost based on the number of people. Now, the lead commissioner would still have to pay a little more, because they not only started the project, but they also are the ones that will get, the credit for the commission. They will also be the very first person to perform it, and also will be, if possible, the first person to record it. But all the other people on the list will also be able to perform it and or record it if needed. It's based on like what is most convenient. But also fundraising works very well. I've not tried Kickstarter or crowdfunding, or I don't know if I said that right,
Yeah,
but I know one composer and a saxophonist did that, I think 10 years ago. I think it worked out. I don't remember, but I know for a fact a lot of people usually resort to consortiums because it's a win-win deal for everyone. Composer will get the money that they requested. It's a win for the performers because they only will get to pay a certain amount of money, but also there's also multiple performances throughout that number of people. And I really try to encourage that because, unfortunately, with how economy's been lately, it's just very expensive to do all types of stuff. So might as well make a deal while you're trying to find new opportunities.
Right. And that's a really awesome strategy to go about when individuals, oh, you know what, this would be great for those going into their junior or senior year recitals at
Right.
colleges. Oh, hint, hint, wink, wink, nudge, nudge. or get even get your local or your collegiate music fraternity or sorority to get involved with that project as well. That just came to mind, like Kappa Kappa Psi or Tau Beta Sigma or Symphonia or whatever.
Right.
Man, that's really cool. Okay. When did you start teaching others to write their own music?
Actually, I've never had a student that teaches that, but most of my teaching has been low brass. But so if I might have to pivot this because I'll just talk about
Sure.
low brass teaching. So I'd love to have a composition student. I just never had it, nor unfortunately, at least in my area, there's not that many programs that promote composition, which I think is pretty unfortunate, but because there's always a need for that.
Mhm.
But as far as low brass goes, When I start teaching, I taught 2012 to 2015. Then there was a break because I was moving all over the place, and I started in 2022. Most of my students have been euphonium players in middle school. I have had a euphonium player, a fifth grade euphonium player, who switched to a tuba in fifth grade, which I thought, wow, that's pretty early actually, but hey, more power to him. And I've had a couple trombone students. And you were asking about like when I started it, or what were you asking specifically?
Well, sort of. I'm actually going to take your pivot because
Sure.
you brought in a really phenomenal point and maybe a value point for our parents of these student artists or those that are considering incorporating music into maybe a homeschool program or whatever.
Okay.
You mentioned just moments ago that it's important to include composition in their music education. Why is it important for the students to include composition in their musical education?
I think what makes composition really important is, for a musician, it's very important to know how a piece is formed. We understand that music theory is important. Like music theory, composition also helps understand the actual design of a piece. Like, for instance, if you're playing a sonata, whether it is for like it's a piece that was arranged for tuba or euphonium, or an actual sonata, you have to you'll get to learn and understand why sonata form exists. Why does it function the way it is, and not just, oh, there's 4 movements or 3 movements. And for, you know, as far as like going into composition, you basically will learn that there are some people will say, oh, you have to follow a certain set of rules that are made in music theory. That's true, but when you get more involved, there's actually a lot more flexibility when you write than just writing 1 4 5 1 or one, something like that for Roman numeral analysis. But I think really for high school, it just gives them more of a better insight of how a piece is created, where their part fits, how does everyone else parts fit, and ultimately just helps you understand the basis of how music's formed. So it's
You
pretty
hit
cool.
it on the head right there. You mentioned 1 4 5 1. Yes, that's part of music theory. I cover it in quite a few other interviews. I ask about solfege and musical numerical notation, and that 1 4 5 1 is referenced to musical notation, numerical notation. So, what is for our beginner artists and the parents who heard 1 4 5 1 and they're like, that's so foreign. I have no idea what he means.
Yeah.
You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, sure. Sorry about that.
No. That's perfect. I mean, it really is perfect. So go for it.
Yeah, sure. So for those who aren't aware, when I say 1 4 5 1, and it's in music theory, we go through chord progressions. So for example, if you're playing a piece in the key of B flat major, B flat is Roman numeral 1, which stands for tonic. That is the main key of the piece. 4 is called subdominant, which is, in the case of B flat major, it's the 4th scale degree, which is E flat. So basically notes in the E flat major scale apply into that field. 5 is known as dominant, which is the 5th scale degree, so B flat, you go to F major. So you go B flat, E flat, F, B flat. That's the 1 4 5 1 progression. I hope I made it more clear. I know it's one of those things that's pretty complicated to explain,
It
but
is that would be for the more advanced. I would say the more advanced artist that wants to take their initiative to learning that. You can always contact Michael Goodman below for compositional lessons to understand more if that is something that really intrigued you, and or just drop a comment below and someone will message out to you and reach out to you. That's actually really good. So that was a good bridge. Thank you for describing that.
yeah, no problem.
Okay, so what opportunities do you see performing artists having now? As I mean, we kind of covered it with commissioning and providing consortium-based commissions for artists. What other like opportunities do you see students or those that are colleagues having as professionals, or even all the way down to student artists having, and what can they start preparing for?
I think the very first thing I think of when I thought of this question was social media. When I was in high school, I mean, I'm gonna age myself here by accident, but I was in the mid late 2000s. I was in actually mid 2000s. I was in high school. College I started late 2000s. Around that time, social media was in the baby stages. That, you know, we had Facebook and MySpace, but there really was not much to do other than, oh, let's reconnect with old like family members we don't know or friends we haven't seen in years. But for students now, I think what's really fascinating is social media plays a huge role in networking. And whether you're a performer or a composer, there's always someone out there that's looking for someone like you, or you might be looking for someone and say, hey, let's build a relationship. Let's talk and see if our interest or match, and then we can create opportunities. And the other thing I'll add is it's also like there's a lot of talk about how you have to live in a certain city or a certain like area like Los Angeles, Chicago, New York City to make things work. That's not the case anymore. Now it's like when social media, I mean, I'm doing this interview right now with Nick, and we're not in the same state. We live in two different areas, and so we're able to make this work possible. So for students, please take advantage of the networking, especially in this age, because it's definitely it's much better than it used to be. So
absolutely. And there's with this platform of the International Euphonium Summit now, it's to showcase the talent and the possibilities and the potential of making that connection is more prevalent. And I mean, this is proof in the pudding. This is proof that social proof that it does work. That's exactly how we met, is looking at social media profiles. Hey, really want to see if this works together, and to be able to give you a platform and such like that. And it's creating your own blue ocean. And by doing that, you can contact Michael Goodman in any regard, when it comes to composition, to writing a piece, to collaborating, to providing extra ability to maybe come speak, or whatever the case may be, to really encourage taking that initiative. So, wow, that's really cool. What 5 books would have impacted your life and possibly help define the principles that have guided you along your journey?
Oh man, I have to be honest, I'm not much of a book reader.
So do you do
But
audiobooks?
well, I have books, but like I've tried audiobooks, but it just takes a lot of time. But I don't have 5, but I do have, if you don't mind, I have 4.
That's right. That's one,
Sure.
2,
So
3, 4.
do I need to explain them, or can I just
No,
list them? Or
you can list them and we can go, however
yeah.
it goes.
So the 4 I actually have, the 5th one is asterisk right now because it could come up. You never know. So the 4 I have right now is Staying Composed by Dale Trumbore. The other one I have is actually a notation book called Behind Bars by Elaine Gould, that I can explain later.
That's cool.
The other one is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. And then the other one is Rocking the Boat by Deborah Meyerson.
That's cool. What's Rocking the Boat?
Go ahead. Yeah, Rocking the Boat. I actually had to read this for a class in a Florida State University, and the idea of rocking the boat, it's not a music book. It's actually more of a business book, where basically the idea of going into a workplace and you're trying to make a difference. And I'm sure a lot of people have been in this situation. You might as well. I have personally. Basically, you might enter a new workplace and you want to be doing like something that makes you, but the workplace might say, well, we don't allow that decision right away. Like I'm going to rephrase it. Like you might have an idea and say, oh, I want to try this change or that change. Your supervisor might say, oh, well, we can't necessarily do that right away. Let's just think it over and go from there. So you can't necessarily make huge changes, but what you can do is you can make little adjustments or little little like I said, little adjustments to make it work. So for example, um, there was one great example I read in the book where you had an African American woman who likes to wear her hair braided, but the employer is like, no, we don't really want you to have your hair braided because we want to keep a certain look. Now, obviously, that is not necessarily the best way to respond to that, but as far as making adjustments, this woman had to make that adjustment just for the time being, but slowly but surely make tiny adjustments or tiny successes to make it work. And so I think it's just a matter of building trust and being more acceptable. And ultimately you can do that. You can be yourself. It's just you have to pace yourself type deal.
So that kind of brings me up back to the music stage with the International Euphonium Summit and music in general, is taking a solo and how that bridges from my mindset. I was thinking how this correlates with music is like when someone performs a certain or sets themselves up to practice a certain solo, right? And they hear a recording, and that's a standard recording of a certain piece, but the artist has an urge and their own idea of how to, kind of like a conductor, how each conductor has his or her own way of conducting a piece on their platform, not necessarily on someone else's platform and interpretation. And I hope that was clear enough, but rocking the boat is a good thing for those that are creative. I mean, as a musician, we are creative by nature. We chose a really odd instrument that most people can't pronounce, especially when they first see the name, let alone understand it unless you say baby tuba.
Yep.
and for euphonium players and artists, it's about, this whole summit is about equipping you with a roadmap to become who you want to be, to craft that your own dreamscape and visualize how the contours, like Michael was saying earlier, your specific word contours out as you're writing or scripting your own, like how you foresee yourself and your vision and where you want to go. So maybe that is a really awesome book to grab hold of. I mean, The 7 Principles by Stephen R. Covey is a phenomenal book. And then your other 2 books, Behind the Bars. You want to care to elaborate on that real quick?
Yeah. So to clarify, it's not a reading book. It is essentially a big music notation book from Elaine Gould, who was the senior publisher of Faber, which is a publishing company in Europe. And specifically, what makes that book so fascinating to me is the amount of detail that is put in there about how to do certain things in music notation. There's a lot of music notation books, but that one in particular covers so many topics. Like not only covers like how do you write a dynamic, how do you write for a specific instrument, but it even goes to great detail on how you format music and how you specifically, what are the sizes of music, how to make a piece set up correctly. I could go into some real lingo on this, but I'm not going to for the sake. But basically, it covers a wide range of topics that a lot of other books do not cover.
So basically, you're saying that if you're a student artist who's wanting to explore composition, may really would benefit as a birthday or going away to college for composition, or they're composition major or minor, and you don't know what to give them just yet, and you are pretty certain that they don't have this book yet, this would be that book you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, hopefully you were at a program where they have this in the library, but if not, it is definitely something worthwhile. It's been out for, I'm looking at the book right now. I think it's been out for about 10 years. Yeah, I think it's, it's been out for 10 years at least.
That's awesome.
And it's definitely something worth checking out.
That's really phenomenal. I think that would be a great addition, as well as going back to your actual pieces that are listed on your sites below. I would recommend our viewers and those that are looking for new pieces to even sight read, go check these pieces out. And you may uncover a something symbolic that you resonate with within these works. I encourage you to do that. Or if you're a parent of a student artist and you want to increase their sight reading material, secure one of those works below, or even have a birthday gift commission of their favorite childhood song or something like that. There's a lot of really great ideas to pull from. But if you need any of that information, you know where to reach us. Links below. And make sure you share this with your fellow family members or your extended family members that care about you, to drop hints at a possible commission or a possible solo or whatever, or lessons. Michael Goodman, thank you so much for joining us and being willing to contribute to this International Euphonium Summit. The richness and your experiences, how you bridged that gap of when you first started to now, and especially when it comes to composition and brass band playing. We dove into kind of tip of the iceberg stuff on almost all of that. And if anybody wants to learn more about you, feel free to search them out on the links below. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm glad to have met you and have this time.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what transpires post interview and post this initial summit with the years to come, and with the vision that I have. I can't wait to share with you on the flip side of the live recording. So if you haven't yet signed up for the transcriptions, it's a lot more interview basis, and you can actually read through what has been said and before and after the interviews. And we'll catch you on the flip side of this. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon.